Tomorrow we'll be wooing another little town. We'll always keep it up, even when we're down. Mates on the road, happy to be, born to play music till we die. Chapter 24. Like a boomerang we shall return, with another story and song. One of the most agonising aspects of touring a show is finding a good road crew and keeping it all together. In the old days, invariably I found there was one bad apple that spread rot over the whole organisation. I heard Joan Baez say on the television that she reached the age of 60 before she found the perfect team. It's been much the same for me. More often than not, it was marijuana or alcohol that caused the problem, and a musician often caused it. If one of them couldn't score a deal, he became quite agitated and hard to deal with. This often led to tantrums or the truck being driven hundreds of kilometres out of the way to meet a dealer. Of course, quite a few of us had fun with dope in the early 80s, but once things got serious, it was a thorn in the side. Out of that period, a few became addicted. There are many issues involved here. I've always had a policy that anyone touring with me could do what they liked after a show, but there was to be no alcohol or drugs while on the job. First and foremost, it was a safety issue. One lighting guy thought he could smoke dope and still climb ladders. Even when he knew the rules, he persisted. I could smell the stuff from a mile away, so that was the end of him. Shame, as he was quite good at his job. I once had a guitarist who insisted that he have a bourbon on stage. Well, he obeyed the rules for a while, but then became sneaky. This started to corrupt the show. One night in Mudgee, I realised by the time I sang True Blue that he was absolutely pissed. His playing was all over the place. We went off stage while the audience cheered for more, and I sacked him on the spot. He did never return to my stage. Secondly, my reputation is at stake. Now that I realise that marijuana can cause huge psychological problems amongst other things, I'm the last to encourage young people to smoke it. It might be useful to some people who are in pain, and if it were used medicinally, that wouldn't bother me. I watched a documentary about a Tibetan monk years ago. He was using quite desperate measures to cure young men of addiction to all sorts of drugs. As the monk was being interviewed, I remember seeing a line of young men sitting on the ground in the background, drinking water until they threw up. The journalist asked him what was the worst drug. Surprisingly, he said marijuana, because it damages your nerves. That was enough for me to back off in 1996, even though I was only a very occasional user. It made me aware that my nerves would jump sometimes when I was asleep. It doesn't happen now. My other observations are that I think dope slows down the process of maturity, especially for teenagers. I reckon if you want a natural high, get up at sunrise and walk along the beach or along a bush track and be aware of the beauty around you. That's what your nose, ears and eyes are for. In the pub days of the 80s, I referred to dope in a few humorous songs like The Shed and Marijuana Australia, but now I rarely sing that material. Recently, the Men's Shed Association wanted to use the song, and I suggested that I modify the lyrics, but they didn't want to know. It's probably nostalgic for the old buggers who also came through the 80s. I've also had a number of people at my shows recently who want to know why it's not on my latest best-of album, A Hell of a Career. You now have the answer. I don't know how I got away with some things that happened in the early days. I had one so-called sound engineer who really had very little idea of what to do if something went wrong. A good sound engineer understands electricity as well as the wiring for sound, but once the gear is set up, they need a good ear. It's a luxury to have an actual recording engineer, but they actually won't lug or won't tour or are too expensive or too arrogant, and on it goes. The ongoing problem of having a good team. I envy someone like Kenny Rogers, who has had most of his team forever, apparently. The market and audiences are so much bigger in the United States that he can afford to keep a good band and crew financially happy and in work. I'm sure from an artistic perspective, I can keep an outfit happy. They've always been proud to work with me, and the crew I have now is fantastic. Mike Chandler, Dan Webb, and Heath Moore are true professionals. One year we took 2 Toyota troop carriers and the 6-ton truck across Bass Strait to Tasmania. I just hired this young fella as a lugger. He always wore army fatigues, those camouflaged army trousers. I remember how he used to brag about being into karate. That was a worry to start with. Anyway, the night after the Bernie's show, 2 of the crew went down to the beach, lit a fire, and opened a bottle of Jack Daniels. The Karate Kid joined them. Apparently they consumed the whole bottle of JD. Next thing, the other lads were knocking on my motel room door as the sun was coming up, whispering, "He has a rifle." I let them in and they explained about the JD and how the Karate Kid had disappeared, then come back to a sand dune near where they were. They could hear him saying, "Gotcha, click, click, gotcha." But now he was back in his motel room playing with the rifle. Oh, God, I thought, and immediately rang the police. It was a very tricky situation. Did he have any bullets? Apparently, he had karate kicked in a large door at the Army storehouse down the road and procured an Army-issue M16 rifle. Well, the Burnie police behaved like Keystone cops. Instead of driving quietly in and sneaking up on the lad's room, they tore in with sirens blaring. Bloody hell, if he was really out of his tree, he could have easily mowed them all down. Fortunately, he had no bullets and the cops managed to make him throw the rifle out the door. So the Karate Kid was taken downtown, and shortly after I drove to the police station and explained that he had no father. He was by now feeling sober and apologetic. His fingerprints were taken and they left me with the problem to solve. I took responsibility, gave him $100 and flew him back to his mother. I hope we didn't release a maniac on the public. The lad in question might have straightened himself out, but I hope he never touches Jack Daniels again. I'd be relieved if his mother reads this book. Maybe she could let me know that he has turned out okay. I've always tried to treat everyone on the road as equals, even though some of them need to be brought down a cog or two. One night off, one of the luggers was big-noting to all the ladies in the pub and being quite an embarrassment to the rest of us. A couple of the girls he was chatting up were looking our way, and I foolishly said, "Don't worry about him, he's just one of the shit-kickers." Well, the next day, the truck was not washed and had shit-kickers written in the dust all over it. I had to sit the crew down at the next theatre and explain the context, and I apologised. I then demanded that the truck be washed. Generally, though, I haven't had too much go wrong. I've always had reliable vehicles. I brought a brand new Hino truck, which we took on the road for about 20 years, back in the days when you had to take your own full sound and lighting everywhere. The Troopies were bought for their toughness, and I still own 2 of them. You can't wear them out, and they have hardly any rust. One of them is my main farm vehicle at Springbrook. The other has been decommissioned, but I'll turn it into a camper one day when I become a grey nomad. Actually, there's hardly ever been a need for a 4-wheel drive vehicle while touring. These days, the sound and lighting systems are much more compact, and most venues have what we need. The old bulky sound gear is waiting in my shed for the day when I do a private gig up north. The truck that's now too rusty to register will make an ideal stage. In the meantime, it's been ideal for storage and has become another bedroom with a king-sized bed for a recent family Christmas gathering. Waste not, want not. I rarely take on overseas gigs. Firstly, my goal has always been to write for Australians, and therefore I never imagined my music would mean that much anywhere else in the world. I know it appeals to tourists who have visited Australia as a memory of their trip, and that audience continues to grow for me. But my music is parochial, so I don't expect ever to make a mark on the international stage. It bugged me sometimes that it seems important to Aussies that you are world famous. It would be nice financially for me to be world famous, but deep down, I'm always happy to be well known in my own country and appreciated for writing songs that have a lasting meaning to my own people. I certainly don't want for anything. All this doesn't mean I can't entertain people overseas, though. After all, Australia is an interesting place, and there are many Brits who dream of coming to live in our country. It was those people, I guess, who came to my concerts in the 1990s in England. My first of these 3 trips over there was in 1996, where I had performances in London and Dublin. The whole band was with me. I took my stage backdrop of ghost gums, my footbox and stool, and all the stage gear. One night the crew left the van outside their accommodation with all the stage gear inside. Next morning we woke to find it had been all stolen except my precious Maton guitar. That was unbelievable. The lid to my guitar case was open and all. The thieves were either disturbed or felt sorry for me. Perhaps they were musicians and it was the honourable thing to do. The sound equipment could be replaced, but never my beautiful little 1991 Maton BG-808. That guitar is my sound and is still my favourite. Maton gave it to me back in 1991. Billy May, who started Maton, made me a steel string guitar in the 70s with a wide neck. I was used to the wide fretboard after the classical and 12-string guitars I'd been playing. Unfortunately, a man pretending to be an airline porter in a white coat in Los Angeles stole that guitar. I had another Maton, white-coloured, stolen by a TAA employee. Linda and Neville Kitchen, Billy May's daughter and son-in-law, who now own Maton, have been generous to me and given me several guitars, including a beautiful Messiah that is still drying out and getting richer every year. I have many guitars. If I write a song on a particular guitar, it deserves to be looked after and I'll never sell it. After the robbery in England, I was devastated at the loss of my backdrop of ghost gums too. It was irreplaceable over there. We received a lot of publicity about the robbery of the Aussie gum trees, and guess what? It was left in the doorway of a news agency in Worcestershire. We were able to retrieve that precious suitcase with the backdrop intact. Honourable thieves, as I said. I felt a bit like Lucky Gander, Donald Duck's cousin. I'm certainly not a gambler, but I consider I've been extremely lucky throughout my career. That was one of those times. I returned to England again in 1998 for a solo tour, and again in 2000 for another solo tour of 10 concerts in London, Edinburgh and the Midlands. My dear friend Ed Doolan, an expat Aussie radio presenter on the BBC in Birmingham, was a huge promoter of my music and my concerts over there. In fact, for many of them, he was the MC and introduced me on stage. Not only that, he introduced me to many important people. From London to Birmingham, I entertained theatre audiences of 300 to 500 people. I guess if I lived in England, I would have been happy with that, but I can do better at home where I really prefer to be. The gloomy English weather would get me down after a month. I think it makes the people a bit gloomy too. Perhaps if I somehow produced a hit song in the United Kingdom, it might have been different. But my music, as I expected, was regarded as a novelty and not taken that seriously. I gave it enough of a go to convince myself that it's not what I want. It has been my crusade to write songs that make us proud of who we are and to encourage people not to take this country for granted. I'd never written anything outside Australia that was very good, except A Number on My Back, which I wrote in New Zealand after Wallabies' defeat. It is Australia that inspires me in so many ways. When I think of all the men that played, that took the knocks and made the grade, the legends that the game has made, I can't believe I'm here. I'll wear the gold with a sleeve of green, it makes me strong, it makes me keen, and I'll go forward like a steel machine till the cracks in the foe appear. Could it be a dream, my father's son? That's me, humbled by the truth I am, a golden wallaby. And I will seize the day 'cause it belongs to me. I have a number on my back, I am a wallaby. And if the ball won't roll my way, no matter how I try that day, I won't let my temper fray. I'll fight on till the end.